Have you ever had an idea that was so clear it was like a 3D movie? Have you ever told a friend about the idea and they told you, wow, if you could only make that into a business, you would be rich? Sound familiar? Welcome to Knowledge to Currency. I'm your host, Senator Porter, with my co-host, Roosevelt Williams III, and we're here to help you take action. This is free information. We only ask one thing: build a strong foundation and mindset. We have insight to help you get started. Most of us just need a push. What's happening, everybody? I'm Senator Porter, and I have Sharyna Scott here. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome to the show. This is a big episode because I've had a bunch of friends and family and just different people try to talk about estate planning, and they tell you their methods and they tell you certain things that don't sound right. So I wanted to have an actual expert on the show that can help educate us. So thank you so much for coming.
Yes, not a problem. I love educating. So this is great.
So I know that you are from San Diego.
I am. I'm a unicorn. I'm one of those
Right.
born and raised in San Diego, and didn't really venture out of San Diego till college and law school. And then had a winter in Boston and turned my tail right back here
Yeah,
to where I came from.
Cold and expensive.
Yes, and yes. But I enjoyed my time out there. I couldn't hang with those
with the
winters.
cold.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, especially like today. Today's so nice compared to how it was 2 weeks ago, where it's like we was in Seattle.
I know it's kind of starting to bring a little of that coldness over here. I don't like that.
How long have you had your law firm?
I founded my law firm in 2016, so
Nice.
like 7 years. It's flown by, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I actually wasn't planning on doing my own firm at first.
Right.
I wanted to go work for a nonprofit because that was a lot of my experience in law school.
Mm-hmm.
But when I graduated in 2013, they weren't really hiring for an attorney coming on, and so I just. A good friend of mine, she said, why don't you start doing hang your own shingle?
Wow. That's big. Right out of college.
Exactly. It was huge, but I'm actually really grateful that she told me that that's what she did. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way because I love that I get to pick my clients and then devote my all to them as opposed to being assigned a client at a firm or a nonprofit. And that's how I got into estate planning. Right.
And then, because you're an attorney, but you started out doing immigration, right?
I did.
Right.
So immigration was my passion project, and it still is. I want to do some work with that later on once I get my firm established. But I love being able to help. I did work with victims of abuse, helping them get a status that way. Mm-hmm. And so that is primarily what I wanted to do. But after coming back and passing the bar, thankfully, I wasn't able to find a position. But I did have family members, the licensed lawyer in the family. Oh, can you look at this for me? And so my grandparents asked me to create a power of attorney document for them.
And that's how we started.
That's how it starts. It's usually like one little thing, right? And so I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can occupy my time while I'm filling out applications. Mm-hmm. And so they gave me their stuff, and they did like one of those forms from like Susie Orman or something, like some financial expert. Right. And I looked at it and my heart dropped because they had all the documents with all their names input, but they never signed anything. Ooh. And they had printed those out or got it like 4 years prior. And so they thought they had all of this, documentation in place, and it was outdated by that time, not signed, so it was just paper.
Dang.
So I saw that, had a mini heart attack, but I had a meeting with them. I was like, no, we're starting all over. We're going to get you everything, do it right, and make it effective and make it valid. So that was kind of my launch into the world of estate planning. So they saw that and started telling their friends and family members, and Sharyna could do this for you. So that's how it kind of grew in, and actually that ended up being right where I wanted to be. I love working with families. I'm close with my family. I'm oldest of 4 kids. Right. Parents been married over 35 years. So
hey, shout out to the parents.
I know.
35 years.
Love
That's
it.
Nice.
Yes. It'll be 36 actually in May, but So I'm really close to my family and was taught to value that. So it's very cool that in the work that I get to do, I'm helping families. And so that's kind of the main motivator that I have.
Not only that, like if something were to happen and that paperwork that they had, which they paid for and thought they did everything right, but with paperwork and documents and contracts, you got to make sure everything's dated, signed properly, filed properly. I worked in lending, so even the color of the ink matters. Like people don't realize
that blue ink, right?
Yeah, blue or pink. Like no, got to make sure everything's right. So then let's kind of go down that journey. So then you get into the estate planning. What's something that's a lot of people that come up to you that they don't know? Like, what's one of the most common questions you hear?
That's a great question. A lot of people ask me, one, they don't know a difference between a will or a trust. And then two, they think if they have a will, that's all set.
Right.
Like, that's all that they need. And so usually it depends. But that's why I like to start by saying what A versus B is. So a will in California, and I'm going to say this over and over again, in California, because each state is different, they have their own rules. But in California, a will is great for a person to state specifically what they want to happen with everything that they own after they die. That's the basic of it.
Right.
And so it's incredibly important for that because if no one has any documents in place, well, then a judge in probate court through probate administration will have to kind of find a representative or family members and kind of figure that out based on the law. We call it intestate succession.
Sure.
So a will is a great way for anybody to say, beyond the grave, this is what I want to happen with my stuff, basically.
Right.
Where it gets more complicated in California is if a person owned all of their assets valued more over a certain amount, usually $184,000, then a will by itself is actually not going to be enough to keep their estate out of probate.
Okay.
So that is the main thing. Yeah. If you don't get anything else from this, just kind of remember that number, remember that gauge. So we have what's called a small estate affidavit in California. So that number that I said, 184,000, if you pass and everything that you own is less than that amount, then a will is fine.
Right.
You can do a quick affidavit. Your surviving family members can take whatever you left behind.
Sure.
But last I checked, for those people that own any type of property in California, unless you know something I don't, in which case, please reach out to me. There's no home in California that's under $184,000.
Yeah. Minimum or medium average price right now at $849,900. So yes.
Way above that. Way above that. So so that's usually where estate planning is so important for people. I usually say if you own a home in California, you definitely want to look into a trust. It can also be not just property, but it can also be if you have investment accounts or a business that's valued at more than that amount, again, remembering that amount. If you have something like that, then you definitely want to look at something like a trust to hold it. Now, there are other ways to avoid probate. Some specific accounts like a retirement account, if you name a beneficiary on that, it'll go to that person without probate administration. But you kind of have to know these things and navigating it.
Sure.
But the main thing is most people don't want their loved ones to have to go through probate administration.
Yeah.
Which I realize I've been talking about that a lot, so I'll just explain what that is briefly. But so when I was saying earlier, when someone doesn't have a will or trust or anything in place to say, this is what I want to happen with my stuff, then they die intestate, which means there's no testamentary document to say what they want. So then usually a nearest family member will have to go and petition the court to be able to administer that person's estate, which is everything that they own. And so then there's certain laws that will go into effect, and a judge will oversee that entire process. No decisions really can be made about passing along any assets before a judge has had time to review that.
Right. And
the process right now, I think a quick probate administration would probably be a year, but it's usually like
and longer.
Yes.
Especially after COVID and all that stuff too.
Yeah, the courts are overwhelmed. We had that pause and stop, and then we were online doing hearings. But even then, like any type of pause just kind of put things well behind. So anybody that's going to inherit, if there's no documents in place, at least a year, and that's putting it nicely, before they would inherit anything.
And then the family members have to agree too, right?
Yes,
So
that
that's
is another thing. So me describing what I did is kind of a simple but generic, uncontested probate. There's also contested probate. So you have to notify all potential heirs when you start a case in probate administration to allow everybody to have a say.
Right.
Because that's kind of really the only time where everybody would have their day in court, so to speak.
Sure.
And the judge wants to make sure all parties know and are aware before anything is distributed, so there's not a lawsuit later.
Right.
But yeah, so if you have multiple heirs or family members that don't get along, which that's very normal in estate planning, like even if there is a trust, it's unfortunately often that one family member is probably not going to get along with the rest of the family members, and there's an issue there. But yeah, so probate court it can be actually a really great place to settle disputes.
Sure.
Because you have a judge who is like a neutral party and will work in as much as possible to fulfill the wishes of whoever passed. But yeah, people can fight it out in court, and they have their chance to say, or argue for why they should inherit over somebody else, and then a judge will decide. The other thing that's good with probate administration is if you have any creditors. So if you had any debt left over, either from taxes with the state, federal, or any creditors like business loans or credit card debt, they get a short window of time, 4 months, to be able to stake a claim. And once that time is passed, then, any sons or daughters or beneficiaries, once that window's passed, they can't come to them later and say, oh, your dad owed me $100,000, pay up. No, you had your chance
and you didn't
in probate, and you didn't take it. So that is a benefit that comes with probate administration, is creditors have a set time. You do have to notify them. But if they don't file a claim, then once that window is closed, then they can't start anything new with the son or daughter afterwards.
So now we heard the wrong way to do it. Let's try to go down the right path. So I come to you. I'm like, Mrs. Scott, I need you to help me set up my trust. How does that work?
So I start with consultation, and I'm like, it's never too early, really. So some people they might come in and ask me for a trust, but I'm going to ask them, okay, tell me about everything that you own right now. What are you into? What's your job? What are your goals eventually down the line? Are you married? Do you have kids? Because all of these things come together for establishing a great estate plan for anybody. So if you're coming to me and you tell me, okay, I just bought my new house, I'm engaged to be married, and I'm expecting a kid in 5 months, and I'm gonna say, oh yes, we're gonna get started right away. We're gonna set you up with a trust so that we can put your home in the trust. We're going to get you a will so that you can nominate a guardian for your child that's coming, because you can only do that in a will. And then I always recommend, so those are things for after you pass, the will or the trust. And then there's things for while you're alive that are emergencies that you didn't anticipate. So that's when the power of attorney for finances and the healthcare directives or living will or power of attorney for healthcare come into play, because we don't know what's going to happen. I don't plan to, but I can leave this building, get in my car, and be a car accident and be unconscious for some unforeseen amount of time. But if I have my power of attorneys, both of them in place, then I'm named somebody that can step in and handle my finances, pay my student loan bills, pay my credit card bills,
just your utilities, or your car payment.
Because they're not gonna, sometimes, some will be, understanding, but they know, whatever day that 15th first of the month comes around, the bills are due. So if you have someone that you've nominated, and it allows you to pick somebody to handle your finances and also medical, which is another big thing that I'll get to in a minute. But if you have someone that you've named, then that helps a lot. So then it kind of allows, again, someone to speak for you in the same way that you would when you're not able to. But you haven't passed. You're still here. Yeah. But it's some type of medical emergency where you are unconscious. You can't do that. A lot of times I have people come to me asking me for those for their parents who are having memory issues and having problems, and they don't have authority to like get on mom and dad's account or put mom and dad in like a day facility so they can be watched. Those two documents are always asked for. And so I would say, again, don't wait, because when you start getting into things like dementia and memory problems, if it's too far advanced and they have no memory of who they are or their family members or what 2 + 2 is, then it's too late to create those documents. It's too late to do a power of attorney. And so sometimes I've had to tell kids, okay, your parent is no longer has capacity. They're too far gone. They can't sign their name. They can't tell me who they are. So you have to go to court and ask for conservatorship or something more intense like that. So don't wait on that.
That takes time as well.
Yes, it does.
Your bills are still coming.
Yes.
Reason why I know this firsthand, because this happened to me. So mine ended up getting colon cancer, and it started going to her brain.
Oh my gosh.
And before she got like to that point, she had a stroke, so she couldn't sign checks and stuff. So then I'd have to go in a wheelchair to the bank with her. They immediately thought I'm trying to like take her money. And like I'm just trying to help her.
Trying to help, yeah.
So it's important that people know about that, because it could be like you have a stroke, or not like you said, you could have a car accident. It doesn't necessarily mean you die, because she lived almost a year and a few months before she passed, but she couldn't do things like we had to help her go to the bathroom, everything. So it's very important that somebody's in place. And for us, as an example, her wishes, everybody was arguing about what her wishes were.
Excellent point.
So it's good that you get this stuff, let everybody know. I was around her a lot, so I knew like what she wanted, but that doesn't mean everyone agreed with what I would say. So then it's like, and then you're just kind of, even when she passed, it wasn't, we were all on one accord. Everyone was like, well, I want to do this. And so you could protect yourself by talking with someone like yourself. And you don't have to have a lot of money to have this in place. That's what a lot of people.
In fact, my thing is, I tell people, when you start 18 or older, at least have a will, then those 2 power of attorney documents.
Right.
Because, again, it really does kind of cut down. I like what you said. I want to circle back to what you said about disagreements among family members with things like finances. Another big area that comes into play is in a case of a medical emergency.
Right.
And I kind of lived that with my grandparents. So my grandma had a very sudden medical emergency. She had a stroke. And so remember I told you earlier, they asked me to make those documents. And so part of that, I had to ask them for their healthcare power of attorney. If something happened to you and you weren't conscious, do you want to stay on life support?
Right.
Or do you, if you do, how long do you want to be on life support? Do you want to get pain medicine? Do you want to be living in a facility? Like all of these questions. And they did not like me for asking those questions,
but you have to.
Because no one wants to think about what could happen if they're close to death.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm actually really glad that I pushed them for that, because my grandmother ended up having a stroke. And so when the doctor came to my mom and uncle and they asked, okay, we can do this procedure. This is the damage so far. We can do this procedure, but, she won't be fully herself. Her full personality likely won't be there. We don't know if she'll be able to feed herself. We don't know if she'll be able to bathe herself or walk around, but we just wanted to let you know what that potential outcome was. And so because I had talked to my grandmother and she was very clear of the type of quality of life she would have wanted to live with, my mom and uncle knew like that's not what she would have wanted.
Exactly.
And so there was less, it was still a hard decision.
Oh, way hard.
Because it's a medical emergency, but they had less stress really, or less wondering, is this what mom would have wanted? They knew because of what she had said before. And so when they made that decision, it took off some burden off of them.
It's just still a stressful situation to be in, and you care about this person, and it was a cold thing to be in the hospital, and they're just doing a job, but that's somebody you care about. We were there like nonstop, so if she had to use the restroom, there weren't a lot of nurses, and they're rotating trying to help other people. So luckily we were there so we could help her go to the bathroom. Yeah. Otherwise they got to sit in their own whatever for. Yeah. So no, that's a good thing to discuss. So then now we got your will set up. We got the trust established. What's something else that someone should want to have?
Good question. As I took us all. So another thing that I'll often ask people is other people on their team, right? So I'm the estate attorney, and so my area is in a specific spot, but I'd love to be able to connect with like any tax professional or financial advisor person that they have, because those two people, they have connections with estate planning. So like, let's say we've set up their trust and everything, but things change and like they've come into a lot of money and then they want to start investing it with the financial advisor. Well, I still would want to be on that team to kind of adapt and update their documents to keep protecting any new interests that they have. So like investment accounts and things like that. So I would encourage people not to kind of keep their people separate. So like their tax person or their attorney or financial advisor or whoever is a guru. It's really good for all of those people to kind of connect, because then they can best protect you and your everything that you own and give you kind of a broader picture of what will be the outcome for any decisions that you make. Because everything, when I'm creating those documents, they have tax implications to it. And then another thing with going on the financial advisor route, a lot of people will have different accounts. And I talked earlier about ways that it can pass to someone outside of probate, which most people, like life insurance, retirement accounts, annuities. I also tell my clients, because that's kind of outside of what I do, but make sure you have a beneficiary named on those accounts. Like that is important. So important, because all of those things, if there is a beneficiary name, doesn't have to go through probate. But if you don't have anybody named, or you maybe named your spouse, but then something happens to your spouse before it happens to you, then it's like nothing is there. And so then that account is kind of sitting out there open.
So did they had to go to court to get that money too?
Yeah, depending on what's in the account. If it's over that $184,000, yeah, you're going right back into I think it's $184,500 technically, but I just say that because that's a ballpark. But if it's over that, if you haven't like named a beneficiary who's alive at the time, that you passed, then it can go right back into probate court.
And then that's money that they have to spend. So then, so we got the team now. We got the advisor, insurance person, you. What else do we need?
I think that would be.
We'd be covered.
I will add one more thing. When you set everything up, you've got your documents in place. You got your team. I know everybody. Don't just not talk to me for like 20 years. Check in with me. Let me know about any life changes. Your documents, everything you set up, it shouldn't just be like a set it and forget it. It shouldn't be like okay, I did that, which a lot of my clients are like, oh, I'm so glad I got this done. Now I don't have to worry. This is going to go in my, safe in the house or in my filing cabinet or whatever. And then the kids know where it is, and then I'm set and I'm done. And I'm like, not quite. Like, I want to touch base with you and see if any updates or amendments need to be done. And that's another thing with these documents. Most of them, not all of them, they can be amended. They can be updated and changed because people's lives change. Sure. You can get married, you can get divorced, and then remarried. You can have more kids. You can move. You can get move to a different house, move out of state. All of these things affect your documents and your estate plan. And so if it's not up to date, then you again start losing that protection from probate or estate taxes or all of those things. So I would say after they've got the team, after we set everything up, keep in touch with me. It's not just kind of like
quarterly updates.
Yeah. Like I like to check in like every 3 years, and it's just like hey, how are you doing? I'm just checking to see were there any changes or anything like that. Just like I do with my business clients. Like I can't. I could, but I don't like to just leave clients just out. Oh, they're done, they're set, so.
Then get to the next person.
Yeah, because if there's an update or a change and we don't account for that in the estate plan, then sometimes it can be like, very minimal protection. And the whole point of estate plan is if you can kind of reduce the amount of taxes that you owe and then pass on everything you own to the people that you want. That's the main goal.
And then what's the difference between revocable and irrevocable trust?
Great question. So revocable means changeable, essentially. And so a revocable trust, if that's what I set up in my name, that means I still have the power to go in and make those amendments or changes.
Right.
And that's what a lot of my clients like to pick because they're usually trying to avoid probate or like do any tax planning.
Right.
Irrevocable trust means unchangeable, and that is you are essentially setting up an entity outside of yourself, usually, so it's not touched.
Right.
So it is set in stone, and the main goal behind it is usually to kind of set aside money for a particular purpose, like college savings for a child or grandchild, maybe setting aside for a spouse to kind of avoid estate taxes. Although California, we've got a pretty high exemption, so and I think we're at 12 million now.
Wow.
But anything over that, a lot of people will begin using like intricate planning
and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, So all of those things. That's why it's like that's how. But that's what when you grow, and that's why I asked in the beginning. I'm like, so what's going on in your life? What do you have? What do you own? What's going on? And so people will do an irrevocable trust to kind of take a portion out of what they own aside to maybe get below that estate tax exemption.
So how do you know when you're ready to go to the irrevocable? You have to have over 12 million?
Not necessarily. You might want, again, like you might want to just set aside money for like, so for me, if I want to set aside money to go to my kids only after they've either graduated from college or if they didn't graduate from college, they kind of lived on their own for like 3 years. And then, I want you to have this money to be able to help supplement your life, not to make it easy, but to help supplement your life.
Right.
And I don't want to touch it at all or have it have anything to do with me. Then I would put it in that irrevocable trust. So it really, it's not just kind of avoiding taxes, although a lot of people will use it for that.
Protection.
But it's essentially anytime you want to set aside, generally speaking, anytime you want to set aside money that should not be touched till a certain condition is met, that's why people would set up an irrevocable
What
trust.
about, like my cousin has a house in the family and he doesn't want it to ever be sold. Would he put it in an irrevocable trust and then have money set aside to pay the taxes on it?
So if he did that, then he's kind of forfeiting any control over that property. So if he's okay with that, then he could do that. I'd probably kind of set that up with maybe an LLC or something or certain entity that could keep going on if something were to happen to him to like manage that. But that is a possibility. But we'd have to look at more details because then I'd want to ask like, so what are you really trying? What are your goals essentially?
It's my grandma's house and he bought everybody out of it and he just wants it to stay in the family and he takes care of it, everything. Whenever we go visit him, we all go to it.
Okay, so he's taking like managing the property. And so then what if something happens to him? Who would be the person?
That's why I'm asking the question because he has will set up. He doesn't have trust. And I was telling him about it and he's really intelligent. That's why this episode is good because it's not always about like people's intelligence with this kind of stuff. They just don't know it. It's not normal conversations that
if you don't know about it, you don't know about it.
You just don't know.
So you don't know it's an option.
So they think like, hey, like you said, I paid for where I should be buried. I got my will. I got my, assets set aside. I'm good. But like you said, there's other things. Because with me right now, I'm going through probate. It's been over a year. And going to the post office and doing all the different things, meeting with the judge virtual. They almost had me fly to Texas to set up a checking account. And I was like, well, Wells Fargo's not in Texas? They're like, yeah, but you got to come to Wells Fargo in
physically.
Texas. I was like, why? And they couldn't explain to me why. So then finally I talked to the right person, and they're like, nah, you could just set up right here in Mission Valley. So I would have flew to Texas to set up this account.
At great expense to you.
Exactly. So it's just like.
And that's another thing, too, with like bank institutions. I just want to throw this out there. That's part of the fun thing of dealing with someone's estate after they pass, whether they have a trust or not.
Right.
It can be really, really frustrating dealing with banks or other institutions because they each have their own rules.
Oh, yeah.
And so they don't always want to pay attention to what the law says or what the document says. And so sometimes you got to keep knocking or being the squeaky wheel till you get the right person that will tell you,
you're right.
Okay, I can handle this for you. But unfortunately, that is really common, what you just shared about, people dealing with banks or institutions,
right,
where it's like, all I need is you to put me on this account. I can show you all this documentation that shows I have the authority to do it. But they get the runaround, and it's so frustrating, and it draws out things that could really be much more simpler.
Oh, yeah. Now you got to set an appointment online. Even though the person is talking to me, help me set the appointment on my phone. All right, so come back next week. And I'm like, you could just literally just notarize this. And nope, I got to come back next week. So then come back next week, talk to that same person, and they notarize it, and I'm done. And like, I was just like,
and it's another week. Because you have all the time in the world you have all the time in the world when dealing with someone's estate. Man, I'm sorry. That is frustrating.
I mean, it's a thing, but it's learning for me because now I can tell other people about it. And like, hey, man, don't do this. Learn from my pain, like anyone's pain. Like, get this in place. Talk to people like yourself, or if they have a family lawyer or whoever, and get this stuff in place because it's important.
Absolutely.
And we're all gonna die one day, regardless if we want to or not.
Death and taxes. We all gonna have experience with that.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have any announcements or anything you would like to say before we end the show?
Sure. So part of like what you were saying earlier, people not knowing what they don't know. This year, I am trying to be more intentional of changing that. So I have quarterly webinars and workshops.
Nice.
And I have one coming up on Thursday, May 25th. It will be a live workshop on what we talked about today, but a little bit more in depth, specifically on trust. So if you want to learn more a little bit about revocable versus irrevocable and what that would look like, I will be doing a live presentation at a wonderful nonprofit called The Well in Grossmont Center Mall. If you go to my website, www.scottlawsd.com, there's an events tab, and it'll have information on there, and you can sign up. It is free. It is free.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I want to get this information out, and I want people to be able to start learning the tools so that they can go and do it themselves.
And then for someone to work with you, do they have to be in California?
Yes, they do. They do. But I do have some connections with people out of state. So I do tell people, even if you have, especially if people have property out of state, reach out and ask me. I will check my network because it's important to me that you get connected with someone that can help you.
At the right people.
Yeah. Instead of, I can't do anything, so I'll just push it off to the side. We don't want that.
Well, I want to personally thank you for being on this episode. I think it's important, and I want to spread the knowledge as well. Awesome. And we hope to work with you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
All right. It's a wrap, everybody. Now it's The Currency, episode 40. Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.